topical application, you can apply topically any drug that can pass through the surface tissue or skin and can affect the whole body. Some examples are lidocaine or birth control patches that are topically administered, nicotine patches. Drugs of abuse such as heroin and cocaine can be snorted because they're rapidly absorbed through the nasal lining. So distribution of drugs in time, that response relationship. Most drugs are distributed throughout the body in the blood, and they pass through capillary walls and are diluted and carried to organs and other structures. Typically, it takes approximately 1 minute to circulate throughout the whole body. Factors that affect distribution. Patterns of distribution depend on chemical properties because they determine whether a drug can reach the site of action. The ability to pass through membranes and tissue, the molecular size and solubility properties, such as water versus oil, and the tendency to attach proteins and tissues. Barriers can interfere with drug activity and limit therapeutic usefulness, but also offer some protection. For example, vaccines make antibodies that attach to molecules that make them too big to get past barriers. Talk a little bit about those barriers. So fatty soluble drugs are most likely to cross that blood-brain barrier into the brain. Most psychoactive drugs of abuse can do this. Many water-soluble drugs cannot pass through, and they're unlikely to affect the brain. And then the placenta. The placenta prevents transfer of certain molecules from mother to fetus, but not all. Most affected by molecule size, and most drugs, unfortunately, are small enough to cross that barrier. Time response factors. So the time between administration and reaching the site of action will impact the effects of the drug. So the closer the drug is placed to the target area, the faster the onset of the effects. Drug response is classified by either acute, which are immediate short-term effects. So for example, after a single dose, the intensity and quality of the acute effect may change considerably in a short period of time. So for example, alcohol peaks within an hour. Chronic are long-term response associated with repeated doses. It can differ dramatically from short-term use. And the effects of chronic use may not appear for years. So for example, the effects of tobacco on your heart and lung function. Next is the cumulative effect, and this is the buildup due to a relatively short dosing interval, so there's really no time to metabolize or eliminate. Unexpected prolonged drug effects or toxicity can occur. For example, in alcohol poisoning, where people are binge drinking, or runs with cocaine or methamphetamine use. Inactive and elimination from the body. The body begins to eliminate immediately. There's something called the half-life of a drug, and that's the time required to remove half of the original amount of the drug. Body eliminates the drug either directly, without altering it, or after it has been metabolized or modified. The biotransformation is a process of changing the chemical or pharmacological properties by metabolism. And metabolism makes it possible for the body to inactivate, detoxify, and excrete drugs. Sometimes metabolism can cause a drug to become more active, for example, with heroin. Biotransformation of drugs continues. So the liver is the primary organ that metabolizes drugs in the body, and this is done through enzymes. But there are genetic variation in enzyme structures that produce variation in their activity, which could influence onset, duration, and potency of the drugs. Also, it can influence the vulnerability to dependence. The metabolites pass into urine or feces for final elimination from the body. Kidneys are the next important for elimination. They remove metabolites and foreign substances. They constantly remove substances from the blood. Also, the rate of excretion by the kidneys can be altered by changing the acidity of the urine. Also, sometimes drugs can be eliminated through sweat, saliva, and expired air. For example, breathalyzers can pick up on your blood alcohol content, and breast milk can also could be a way of eliminating drugs from your system. Physiological variables that modify drug effects. Influence of most physiological variables are related to diversity in body size and composition or function. So, for example, age. Your body size and rates of absorption will affect the biotransformation, and elimination will differ from person to person. So small doses, quantity per weight unit for young children or the elderly because of immature or a compromised body process could also influence the rate of how drugs affect the body. For example, gender. So again, body size, hormones, amount of body fat you have, or muscle mass can also influence. Pregnancy. Women are more susceptible to toxicity due to increased physiological stress, and the fetus is vulnerable to teratogens. So again, when you're pregnant, it's best to avoid any type of drugs. Pathological variables that modify drug effects. Those with disease or a compromised organ system must be particularly careful. Some diseases damage or impair organs that are vital for safe responses to drugs, for example, your liver and kidneys. Certain drugs may exacerbate particular health conditions, for example, cardiovascular disease. Tolerance to drugs. The extent rate. So, testing is an important part of prevention, detection, and treatment of drug abuse. And so the extent and rate depends on the drug, the person, the dose, and frequency of use. More rapidly with frequent or abstinence can reduce, but it does return quickly. The body doesn't necessarily develop tolerance to all effects equally, and the exact mechanisms that result in tolerance are not completely understood. But some possible contributing factors could be stimulation of metabolic enzymes, which increase the rate of inactivation or elimination, adaptation of target sites for reduced effects, and behavioral compensation, so troubling effects hidden by the user. So they appear, but they're not a true form of tolerance. Other ways that tolerance can influence drug response include reverse tolerance, so that's a sensitization, so same response to a lower dose, for example, morphine, or cross tolerance. Tolerance to one drug produces tolerance to similar drugs. For example, a heavy drinker is tolerant to depressants. Drug dependence. Drug dependence is associated with physiological and or psychological adaptations. Physiological are changes in the way the body systems respond, and psychological are changes in attitudes and or expectations. The individual experiences a need for the drug in order to function normally. The rebound effect. This is withdrawal symptoms that are opposite to what the drug effects are, and they develop with high intensity use. Moderate to intermittent use usually does not lead to physical dependence, and withdrawal symptoms can be mitigated by original drug or one with similar properties. For example, cross-dependence. Different drugs used interchangeably to prevent withdrawals can be used, and this technique can be used for treatment when a substitute is safer and more manageable than the other. For example, with heroin, methadone can be used. Psychological dependence. So psychological dependence instills a feeling of satisfaction and a psychic drive that requires periodic or continuous administration in order to produce that desired effect or avoid psychological discomfort. Independent, it could be independent or associated with physical dependence, but it doesn't produce a rebound or life-threatening consequence. So psychological dependence produces intense cravings and strong urges. It may be more significant in maintaining chronic drug use than physical dependence. Conditioned patterns of behavior result in continued positive reinforcement. It's contingent on the nature of the drug, quantity used, duration of use, personal and environmental characteristics. Not all psychological dependence results in injury or social harm. For example, coffee. The mental set. So this is those unique personality characteristics or past history of drug and social experience, attitudes towards drug, expectations of effects, and motivation for use. The setting and total environment in which a drug is taken may also modify its effects, and both are particularly important with the use of psychoactives, for example, having a bad trip when using LSD. The placebo effect. The placebo effect is the psychological factors that influence drug response, that are independent of pharmacological properties. Although they appear to have an effect, it does not directly alter any body functions, most likely to occur when mental set is susceptible to suggestion. Some people argue that the placebo effect is a significant component of most drug therapies, especially over-the-counter and herbal therapies. Testing of new drugs must distinguish between a placebo and pharmacological effects. So many times when people are on a clinical trial of a medication, sometimes a placebo will be given, which is an inactive ingredient, and they test to see, as long as it's not harmful to the individual, they test to see if they have the same effects with, say, a sugar pill versus those who actually have the drug with pharmacological ingredients in it.